Hello and welcome to the second part of my English grammar course. And today we're going to be looking at the present continuous tense. If you recall, in the last class we saw the present simple. So today we're going to look at the present continuous tense, and in the next part of this course we will be comparing the present simple tense and the present continuous tense. So first of all, let's look at the statement form. And to form the present continuous statement, we need first of all to use the subject. Here we have the subjects. I is the first person singular. Then we have he, she, or it. These are the third person singular subjects. And finally we have we, first person plural, you, second person singular or plural, and they, third person plural. Of course, we saw these same subjects with the present simple tense in the previous section. The next thing we need to form the present continuous tense statement is the verb be in the present simple tense. We saw the verb be in the present simple tense in the previous section, and we saw that the verb be has three forms in the present tense, and the three forms are am, is, and are. So we need to use am when the subject is I, is when the subject is he, she, or it, the third person singular, and are for the other subjects, we, you, and they. And finally, to form the present continuous tense statement, we need to use the verb with ing. We need to use the verb in its ing form. This form of the verb is actually called the present participle. But just to make it easier here, basically what we're using is the verb with the letters ing after. So here I have some examples: working, reading, studying, eating. So using this information here, we can make some statements in the present continuous tense. For example, I can say I am working, I am reading, I am studying, I am eating. Or he is working, she is reading, it is eating. Or we are working, you are reading, they are eating, we are studying. This is how we form the present continuous tense statement. Now, in the previous class we saw that in the present simple the verb be can be contracted, and native speakers do not normally say I am, or he is, or we are. They say I'm, he's, she's, it's, we're, you're, and they're. And this is what you're going to hear when a native speaker speaks to you, and you should try and use the contractions too, because it sounds much more natural. So with the contractions, the statements are like this: I'm working, he's reading, she's studying, we're eating, you're studying, they're reading. I'm reading, it's working, she's working, they're eating. Just to give you a few more examples. So remember, try and use the contraction when you use this tense. Now let's move on to the negative. Now, to form the negative of the present continuous tense is very easy, because all we need to do is add the word not after the verb be. So instead of saying I am working, we say I am not working. Or to give you some other examples, we say he is not reading, or they are not eating. All we need to do is add the word not after the verb be. Now again, in the negative, native speakers are normally going to use the contraction. And these are exactly the same contractions we saw in the last class concerning the verb be in the negative. So basically, when the subject is I, we only have one choice, and that is to say I'm not. So we would say I'm not working. With the other subjects, we normally have two choices. We can say he's not or he isn't reading, or she's not or she isn't, or it's not or it isn't. And when the subject is we, you, or they, you can say you're not, we're not, or they're not, or you aren't, they aren't, or we aren't. So you would say something like you're not eating, you aren't reading. Remember, we saw this in the previous class. If you need to remind yourself about these contractions, go back to the previous class. I think I'll put a card up here so that you can just click on that and look at these contractions again. So a native speaker is not going to say he is not studying. A native speaker is going to say he's not studying or he isn't studying. A native speaker is going to use the contractions. Now finally we come to the questions and the short answers. So the question is formed first of all by using the question word, if there is one, because sometimes we have a yes or no question. For example, here we have a yes or no question. Is Maria sleeping? So this doesn't have a question word because the answer is yes she is or no she isn't. But if we do have a question word, it needs to come first. That is followed by the verb be and then the subject. So you notice that in the question we are reversing the order of the subject and the verb be. In the statement we need to put subject verb be, and in the question we need to put verb be followed by the subject. If you recall, this is exactly what we saw with the verb be in the present simple. And finally here in the present continuous question we need the verb with ing. So some examples of present continuous questions are: what am I doing? What is he reading? Where are they studying? Those are some examples. There are no contractions in the question form. And here also we have short answers. Again, these are the same short answers that we saw with the verb be in the previous section. Remember, in English there are short answers in every tense, and basically if somebody asks you a yes or no question, for example the one we saw here earlier, is Maria sleeping, it's normal in English to use the short answer and you would say yes she is or no she isn't. In this case it's negative. It's not normal in English if someone asks you a yes or no question to just say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It's not, it sounds a bit rude. So it's better always to try and use the short answers. Is Maria sleeping? No, she isn't. And these short answers are the same ones we saw with the verb be in the present simple. Remember, for example here, like with the negative contraction here, you have two options. You can contract the subject with the verb be and say no he's not, or you can contract the verb be with the word not and say no he isn't. Before we continue with the uses of this tense, let's just have a quick look at the spelling of the present participle. Now remember, the present participle is the correct name for the verb with ing. So most verbs we just add ing. Add ing to most verbs. For example, work becomes working, read becomes reading, study becomes studying, and eat becomes eating. This is the general rule. And underneath we have some exceptions to the general rules. The first exception is one syllable words ending in consonant, vowel, consonant, double the final consonant. For example, run. Run is a one syllable word. It is consonant, vowel, consonant. So when we form the present participle of this verb, we need to double the final consonant, which in this case is N, and the spelling is like this, running, with double N. And we can see the same thing with the other example, sit. Consonant, vowel, consonant, sit, one syllable. We spell sitting with two T's. The next rule, when the verb ends in a silent E, this is the important bit, that the E is silent, we drop the E and add ing. So we see that make, make, make. The E is silent, so the spelling is making. And take, take, again, the vowel E is silent, so the spelling we drop. So on the spelling we drop the final E and we say taking. And the final rule that I have here is for verbs that end in IE, change the IE to a Y before adding ing. And the example I have is die, dying. We change the IE to a Y and add ing. There are actually a few other small spelling rules, but these ones are the most important ones. Okay, very good. Let's continue with the next slide, which deals with present continuous tense uses. So here we have the main uses of the present continuous tense. And before we continue, let's just look at this note here. The present continuous tense is sometimes referred to as the present progressive. Don't get confused. Some grammar books describe all the continuous tenses, and there are 6 continuous tenses in English, as progressive tenses. In some languages there are continuous and progressive tenses, but in English it's the same. The continuous and the progressive is exactly the same thing, just that some grammar books describe this tense as the progressive. So don't get confused. Here in this grammar, in my course, I'm using the word continuous. So the main use of the present continuous tense in English is to talk about something happening now. It's raining. If I say it's raining, it means it's raining now. Water is falling from the sky at this moment. Please be quiet. I'm trying to work. Please be quiet now. I'm trying to work now. In these phrases, the activity is happening at the time of speaking. It began before I spoke. It's continuing at this moment, which is why this tense is called the continuous tense, and it will continue after I stop speaking. So here we have some other examples. Here we have a question. What are you doing? What are you doing now? I'm asking you what you're doing now. I'm working on my project. I'm working on my project now. I'm adding the word now to emphasize it, but the word now is not needed because this tense implies that the activity is occurring now or happening now. Turn off the TV. I'm not watching it. Here we see a negative. We're talking about something that isn't happening now. I'm not watching the TV. And finally, he's wearing a blue shirt and jeans. Okay, let's continue with the second use of the present continuous tense, which is to talk about unfinished or ongoing activities. Here I have an example. I'm reading a good book. Now I can say to you right now at this moment, I'm reading a good book, but obviously I'm not reading a book right now at this moment because I'm teaching you English. But it's perfectly acceptable for me to say that because what it means is that I started reading the book at some time in the past, and after this class at some time in the future I will continue reading it. I've started reading the book and I haven't finished it. It's an unfinished ongoing activity. Another example, my brother is studying to become a doctor. Maybe he's been studying for 5 years and the course lasts 7 years. Maybe at this moment he's not actually at university. Maybe he's in the cinema watching a film. We don't know. It doesn't matter. The thing is that he started studying in the past and he will continue in the future. Is an unfinished activity. Another example, the universe is expanding. Well, this actually is happening now, so maybe I should have put it up there. But the reason I put it down here, I think, was that I want to indicate that it doesn't matter how long the activity has been going on for. Obviously, this particular activity has been going on since the beginning of time and will continue until the end of time. It doesn't matter how long the activity is. The fact is that it's unfinished. And finally, more and more people are learning English on YouTube. This doesn't mean that they're actually learning it at this moment. It's what we call a trend. It's something which is ongoing, happening, and we can use the present continuous to talk about trends. Now, the final use of the present continuous tense is to talk about future arrangements. Now, what do I mean by arrangements? Well, arrangements are like plans. They're fixed events which are going to occur in the future, things that have been planned or arranged at some time in the past and will happen in the future. Now, there is another similar way of talking about plans, and that is the going to structure, but I don't want to look at that today. I will look at that in another class, and when I look at that, I will come back and I will compare the going to structure with the present continuous. But today, let's just have a quick look at how we can use the present continuous tense to talk about future arrangements. And here I have some examples. I'm visiting my mum after work. This means sometime in the future after I finish work, and I'm using the present continuous. This is a typical example of an arrangement. Arrangements not always, but often involve people. I'm not going out tonight. Negative, something I'm not going to do in the future. Again, using the present continuous. And then we have a question. Are you seeing John tonight? And the short answer, yes, I am. I'm leaving next week. Again, a future event using the present continuous. And finally, we're having a meeting tomorrow morning. All uses of the present continuous to talk about the future. Couple of notes down here. First of all, I forgot to mention here, mum. This is actually the British spelling of mum, which is a diminutive of mother in the United Kingdom, and in the United States they spell it like this, mom. This one should have had a capital letter actually. So before I look at these examples here, let's just look at these time expressions. All of these are time expressions that we can use to talk about now. Obviously we have now, and we have right now, at the moment, currently, which is probably a little bit more formal, at present, nowadays, and these days is used to talk about this current period that we're in. For example, I could say to you, a lot of people are using smartphones nowadays, which of course is in the present continuous. And these time expressions would often be used with these here, something happening now. It's raining now, it's raining right now. Normally they come at the end. Please be quiet, I'm trying to work at the moment. These are common time expressions that you would see with the present continuous. If you ever took an exam like the TOEFL or something like that, often they will put in time expressions, and if you see one of these time expressions, you should really be using the present continuous tense. So just before we finish this section, I've got some more examples here. First of all, we have a question. Why are you laughing? The baby's sleeping. Inflation is rising. This is like we saw here. More and more people are learning English on YouTube. It's a trend. Where's Mark? He's busy working. What are you doing here? I'm waiting for my wife. And she's not eating much these days. Very good. So that brings us to the end of this section on the present continuous tense. But in the next class, we will be looking at the present continuous tense again and comparing it to the present simple. And also I will have some practice exercises. And as I mentioned earlier, we will probably come back to this tense and have another look at it when we look at the future. Thanks for watching and hope to see you in the next class.